Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is day 22 of the Russian invasion, and this is the 9th year of the war. My name is Leshchenko, and I would like to welcome you on behalf of Media Center Ukraine. And I would like to thank those of you who cover our fight for freedom, being here in Ukraine, in this free and unbroken country. And also I'd like to thank those of you who follow our fight for freedom using our online tools. There are several important topics that we are following closely today. Of course, we are following the situation at the battlefields. We are following the situation in the city of Mariupol, which has remained under siege, and many of you know about this devastating attack on the drama theater, which was a refuge for many people in the city of Mariupol. In a minute, I'll introduce here Volodymyr Kudrytskyi, who is the CEO of Ukrenergo National Energy Company. And there are several other important events scheduled for today. At noon, we are going to greet here in person Roman Leshchenko, who is the Ukrainian Minister of Agrarian Policy, and we are going to talk about the food security and how the Russian invasion is going to affect the food security situation on the global markets. At 1 p.m., we'll have a briefing with members of parliament, members of Ukrainian parliament, who are back from Strasbourg. As you know, Russia was kicked out of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe and of the Council of Europe in general, so we're going to get more details on that. At 2 p.m., we'll have a briefing on medical issues, and we'll talk about how the Ukrainian healthcare system deals with the new challenges of the war. But for now, I would like to invite here Volodymyr Kudrytskyi, who is the chair of the board of Ukrenergo, and Ukrenergo is the state-run Ukrainian national company, which made big news yesterday when the Ukrainian power grid was interconnected with the EU electricity network. Pane Volodymyr, please join me here. Welcome. And I'll start right away. How we should read the yesterday event? Why is it so important?
Дуже дякую, Андрію.
Andrew, thank you very much. It's a great honor, it's a great pleasure for me to be briefing you today. Yesterday, we marked a momentous milestone for the Ukrainian energy system as we became an integral part of the European energy space in the physical sense of the word. We integrated our grid with the European grid, having previously disconnected it from the energy system of the hostile Russia and Belarus. This severance has happened on the 24th of February at 1:32 a.m., a few hours before the large-scale invasion was launched on Ukraine, and this has become a symbolic moment, a certain break of the epochs. Up until this moment, we had Soviet legacy when we were linked into the power grids of the countries that we couldn't trade effectively with, that we couldn't rely on for technical stability of our grid, as we couldn't be certain that they would not stand us up in the worst moment when we needed their support most. In the future, we have a very good, bright European prospect. We have received a very powerful source of support from Europe. No matter what happens to us, no matter what ruination is inflicted on our grid and our energy system, we are certain that we will be supported by Europe, by the European grid, and they will give us extensive support, they will give us the power we may be needing. In the times of war, this is of critical importance. Even though these 3 weeks our energy system have been remarkably resilient, and our ability to balance the grid was as good as the balancing act in Europe, still In these times of war, there are a lot of uncertainties, and we do need a reliable backup, a reliable source of supply of electricity. This is crucially important for us to assure power to our consumers, and that is important for us to be able to guarantee power for our armed forces. Electricity is a basic commodity. It's a basic essential that the modern civilization can't go about without. And combat is not possible, and resisting the Russian aggression is very difficult without the power supply. So it is a critical resource indeed. In these times, we started merging the Ukrainian grid with the European grid in 2017, having signed the agreement with the European network of transmission system operators for electricity. Usually, the transition takes from 7 to 10 years. This happened in mid-200s to the countries of Eastern and Central Europe. Turkey followed by joining the European grid. Technically, it's a very challenging procedure because in the grid everything operates real time, meaning that we've become a part of a living organism, of a single living space stretching from Lisbon to the glorious Mariupol in Ukraine, meaning that our internal energy system has to be similar to the European one, so that after the accession it wouldn't create problems for the Europeans. This work has been done in 5 years in Ukraine, and this is a case when the Ukrainian energy expert, Ukrainian politicians and diplomats have exceeded all expectations. They have exceeded all the expectations because in the beginning of the road, no one thought it would be feasible by 2022. People were saying that 15 years were needed at least, that billions need to be invested to upgrade and modernize our energy system. I can tell you that 700 million euros were invested both in Ukrainian generation facilities and in the grids, and it took us 5 years. And now we've synchronized with the EU in terms of energy. I can say that we will still need to comprehend this momentous moment as broad prospects have opened up to us. After our victory, we will be able to organize trade in energy supplies with Europe, and it's going to be billion euros worth of currency proceeds that will be made available to the Ukrainian energy companies from selling power abroad. Our consumers will be able to have access to cheaper electricity elsewhere in Europe at certain times, and this will help us bring down the costs of our manufacturing facilities that they pay for power these days. And the global macroeconomic impact of the accession is truly vast. It can be counted in billion euro daily. This is precisely what we'd like to ask you about. What is the benefit for our European partners? How will EU benefit from the synchronization or the merging of our grids? This is an excellent question indeed. We have believed and we hold still that by synchronizing our grids we benefit Ukrainians as much as we benefit the Europeans. You see, Europe is now making a green transition, replacing the obsolete coal and partially gas power stations with green energy. And this process has been so rapid and dynamic that in certain European countries, they are experiencing a deficit of power. This is particularly noticeable in Central and Eastern European countries that we'll be liaising with very closely in the future through trade. So to cover the deficit, at least partially, this is something that Ukraine is up to. We have a nuclear power station bank, our generation capacity, our ample to cover Ukrainian consumption and to export excessive electricity abroad. And our accession to Europe will strengthen the security of energy supply in Europe, as they will get a very powerful, a very reliable source of electricity. In this case, electric power. Please let me know if you have any questions. Meanwhile, I will pose the next question. How would you assess the state of the Ukrainian power grid, the power network? Are the hostilities making an impact, and how are you coping? I'd like to start by saying that to be able to join the EU grid, we had to stand a test. We had to disconnect ourselves from the grids of Russia and Belarus that we had earlier belonged to, and a few days we had to stay in the isolated mode, so demonstrate our ability to balance our system without any external influence. I would say that on the European continent and globally, there aren't that many energy systems capable of balancing themselves out. There are many concerns whether the Ukrainian system would take the test, whether we would be able to balance the supplies, whether we would be able to deliver to all the consumers. But when we started the test, once we disconnected, the war broke out in just a matter of hours. And this has changed the energy balance of the country in a number of mere hours. And now, during the ongoing intentional assaults on our energy grid, considering that the consumption has fallen by 35%, which is an unprecedented decline. Despite it, the Ukrainian energy system was well balanced to such a degree that the frequency, which is like a heartbeat for a human, the frequency in the grid stayed at 50 hertz. We demonstrate incredible resilience and stability of our energy system. There was a time when the invaders assaulted Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station at night, and in 10 minutes' time we had to disconnect 2 nuclear units from the grid. So we've lost the capacity worth of 2 nuclear blocks in 10 minutes. Nevertheless, in this isolated mode, the Ukrainian energy system has maintained stability and no consumers were disconnected. For the Europeans, this was the last and final argument to persuade them to accept us, as they see the incredible resilience and stability of the Ukrainian system.
No, and I just want to add for our foreign journalists that from what we see in the last weeks, the Russians have been specifically targeting not just our civilian infrastructure in general, but specifically our energy infrastructure. That includes our nuclear power stations. We also heard about their plans to attack the Kaniv hydroelectric plant and so on. There is an obvious goal to break the will of Ukrainian people and to make our life extremely miserable under these circumstances. But as you can tell, that all had no success at all. In many ways and in many sense because of the courage and professionalism of the employees of Ukrenergo and of other Ukrainian energy infrastructure companies.
Thank you.
My last question will be, and I'll switch back into Ukrainian.
What do you tell your employees who now have to operate under the threat to their lives and who show incredible determination and professionalism? To work for Ukrenergo, even in peacetime, has meant to shoulder immense responsibility. Every second, every single second, we need to guarantee that the Ukrainian consumers will have enough power in the grid. With the war, the responsibility has multiplied. The people working for Ukrenergo are fully aware of their responsibility. They are aware that their professionalism, their courage, and the determination they show will define the life of other people. I tell my colleagues that all of us working for the company have a mission. And this mission is about helping our country win this war. And we make our contribution. Our repair crews reach out to the theater of operations on a daily basis, putting back the infrastructure in place so that Ukrainian cities could be powered and would have electricity. Unfortunately, we have already sustained losses at our company. Some employees are taking part as combat servicemen, and I'm certain that every employee of our company, especially after yesterday's momentous event, are fully cognizant of the importance of our contribution, of the benefit we can give to our society, and this drives the people better than any incentives or words ever could. This is what is driving us. This is what is giving us the strength to go on. Thank you.
Володимир Kudrytskyi, є запитання?
Якщо можна.
Прошу.
We do have a question. So I'd like to welcome Ukrenergo with this momentous event and like to ask you about the situation at the Chernobyl nuclear power station. We know that the personnel are living through the darkest of times there. Can you give us some updates? Are there any reason for optimism? This is Volodymyr Bloomberg. Thank you for your question. You know, the situation at the Chernobyl nuclear power station in the last week or 10 days has been changing dramatically. Sometime the nuclear power station was cut off from the external power supply. It had to be fueled by diesel, which ran the exhausted nuclear fuel, which is stored at the Chernobyl nuclear power station. It's a not operational nuclear power station, but it's important because the spent nuclear energy is stored there, and it needs to be cooled down, and for that it needs to be supplied with electricity. We have made a number of repairs, restoring the supply of the power lines that were damaged by the invaders. They did that at risk to their lives, as they have drive up to the places where the damage was inflicted through the grain zone. They often had to do their jobs at gunpoint. We continue restoring the reliable energy supply to the Chernobyl nuclear power station. Reliable meaning that Chernobyl has to be linked to the Ukrainian power grid with 2 lines as a minimum, so that one is damaged, the other would keep running. And while our people have to negotiate the corridors, whilst they have to travel into the dangerous operation under shelling, I cannot give you more detail about the status of the repair works, not to endanger our people. The only thing I can tell you is that currently there are no reasons to worry about nuclear safety of Ukraine and of Europe connected with some malfunctions in supplying the electricity to the nuclear power station or fueling the cooling installations. The situation currently is under control, and we are trying to restore reliable power supply to the Chernobyl power station, and this is all I can tell you at this point. No further questions. Thank you very much.
Chair of the board of Ukrenergo, which is the state-run energy company of Ukraine. And our next briefing will be here at noon. And we will be happy to greet here in person Ukrainian Minister of Agriculture, Roman Leshchenko. We are going to talk about the food security situation and how the war has an impact on the global food markets. As many of you know, Ukraine is a country of brains and grains. It's a major player at the global markets of wheat, corn, sunflower seeds, canola, and we'll ask the minister to tell us more about the possible impact of the war and of the Russian invasion on the global markets. So Roman Leshchenko, the Ukrainian Minister of Agriculture, here at noon. Thank you for staying with us, and stand with Ukraine. We'll start our briefing with the Ukrainian Minister of Agriculture in a couple of minutes. The briefing will be held in Ukrainian and in English. If you need the original sound, it's at the speakers or here at this podium. And while you are waiting, I would like to draw your attention to the picture on the screens that shows the drama theater in the city of Mariupol, which was heavily shelled early this morning. And there are two signs in Russian that say children. So that place was, that theater was a place for about 1,000 refugees or several hundred of refugees. And this just gives you the idea. So when the Russians do shell this kind of civilian infrastructure, they know exactly what they're doing. We'll start the briefing momentarily.
Do you know if anybody was recovered from the...
No. Well, it's our understanding that most of the people were in the shelter, but we do not have any exact numbers yet. But if there is an interest for that, I'll do my best to get some exact number. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in a minute I'll introduce Roman Leshchenko, the Ukrainian Minister of Agriculture. And for now, on behalf of Media Center Ukraine, I would like again to welcome all those journalists who cover our fight for freedom, those journalists who are here in person and those who follow us online. And after Minister Leshchenko, we'll have a briefing with Anton Kurinevich, who is the Ukrainian representative to the International Court of Justice. Yesterday, there was an important decision by the ICJ. That was a specific decision on the Russian invasion, and you will be able to get all the details on that decision right after this upcoming briefing with Minister Leshchenko. And now, without further ado, I would like to invite here Roman Leshchenko, Minister of Agriculture of Ukraine. And my first question will be, how would you describe the situation with the food supplies for Ukraine under these very dramatic circumstances?
Dear colleagues, in terms of food supplies in Ukraine, the situation remains under control as we are one of the main exporters of food globally. The civilized world knows that Ukraine has produced the yield rates in 2021 of 100 million tons of grain, oil crops, and others. Ukraine has successfully implemented the land reform, having launched the irrigation reform, and the growth in the agricultural sector comprised 20% in 2021. As for food supplies, the country has stocks of wheat for 2 years' worth. We have stocks of oil for 5 years' worth. We have stocks of corn for a year and a half worth. We have everything that is needed to ensure the food safety of the country. Moreover, we have very good news today based on the climate conditions and soil conditions that have formed now. The condition of the winter crops are doing very well. The vegetation continues, the temperature is stabilizing. There were no significant frosts, and in the next few weeks we'll be starting an active phase of the agricultural works of the cultivation. Now that a lot of disruption happened in the regions around Kherson, Kharkiv, Sumy, Chernihiv, which were the agricultural production centers for many commodities in Ukraine. For sure, Ukraine will need to readjust. We will need to step up production through the governmental orders. The decision was made by the government and the Ministry of Agricultural Policy and Food is encouraging internal production. Over 300 food processing companies are now receiving governmental orders. The government is paying for these placed orders, and they're making food commodities for the Ukrainian people. We have simplified all the procedures to do with the taxation. As you will probably know, the martial law, under the martial law, only 2% of the income tax remains. More revolutionary decisions are waiting for the import of foodstuffs and other commodities to do all the humanitarian relief. All the red tape obstacles will be removed, hampering the custom clearances. Moreover, the government has come out with a mechanism to support the agricultural sector, offering loan guarantees worth 25 million hryvnia to ensure preferential loans for the farmers for the sowing campaign. The deregulation has been put in place to simplify the licensing for the pesticides and fertilizing. Access for the fuel has been streamlined. Euro 3 and Euro 4 standard diesel can be imported into Ukraine to ensure there's enough of it. The registration of the agricultural machinery has been simplified, same for the seed stocks, and now the Ministry of Agricultural Policy is coordinating the sowing campaign to make sure the Ukrainian people have enough food. Thank you. We tell the foreigners that Ukraine is a country of brains and grains, is a brain basket. They should mirror the important role Ukraine plays on the global commodity market. How will the Russian invasion impact the global food markets, meaning that Ukraine is a serious global player on the markets such as sunflower seed, wheat, and a number of other agricultural commodities. Ukraine is among the top 5 world exporters of food commodities. For some items, we make it to the top 3. In terms of food security, we provide more than 400 million people worldwide with food, and that's in excess of the Ukrainian population. Considering the logical, infrastructural, and all the other connections, the countries of Africa, Near East, and Southeastern Asia will be worst affected, as Ukraine in the last 10 years hasn't imposed any limitations on export. It was a stable and reliable producer of food commodities, delivering on its contractual obligations, and I am very sorry that a lot of analysts and experts worldwide keep writing that they are deeply disturbed about the way food security is playing out in Ukraine, but they fail to understand that this is not about Ukraine. This situation is far more global, and we are keen to make our messages clear. If we take the Black Sea Basin, and if we consider Ukraine and Russia, leaving aside Kazakhstan, which is also is a lion producer in the food security of the world for wheat, then Ukraine and Russia today account for 30% of wheat export, almost 30% of corn, and 80% of sunflower oil. You need to make it clear by blocking Ukraine at the Black Sea without preventing access for the Ukrainian infrastructure of ports to be able to export wheat, and wheat is exported through ports by 80% of the volume. By doing that, Russia has blocked the export from its own produce. Just recently, the export of produce was blocked, the exports of the mineral fertilizers were blocked, and maximum limitations were imposed on world trade. This will mean that if we take 30% of the food wheat globally, it will irreversibly lead to a global food crisis, and the price at Chicago, $500 per ton, is not going to solve the problem. This is going to mirror the situation with gas. It's the same situation where the price on gas has gone beyond the market regulation and it's not available any longer. The same is going to happen to the wheat. A separate issue is that no food at the global markets has also been linked to the blockage of the deliveries of mineral fertilizer. Russia is one of the main exporters of mineral fertilizers. If they fail to deliver their commitments, then the productiveness of yields per hectare is going to go down by 30-50%, as mineral fertilizers are an integral prerequisite to effective agricultural production. Third point, third message. As for the countries that are limited in their costs to buy food commodities, such countries as Libya, Lebanon, Yemen, Egypt, Syria, and dozens others have a budget for buying foodstuffs and have 3-month or 6-month stores of foodstuffs. The food crisis wave is going to trigger instability across many regions of the world, growing poverty, growing famine, change of political regimes, and is going to have far-reaching repercussions on the migration that will affect the entire world. So, when anyone is trying to localize the conflict, saying that it's a personal story of one country, then they are very wrong, because today we are facing an energy crisis and we are facing a food crisis. And in the short-term perspective, this is going to trigger a world economic crisis. So the end of the war and these matters are on the global agenda. Let's start with the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Cao Jie from Phoenix TV, Hong Kong. Actually, I've been to your local supermarket since I come to these cities for many times. I noticed that actually the supply is not bad, but to be honest, it's not easy to find everything I want to buy. I want to know, is that the common phenomena in most of the cities in this country? I heard in a cave, people still feel difficult to buy everything they want. Do you think the worst situation is happening in some the suburb area, some village? And what's the key reason? How can you sort out the problem? I mean, your government. And also, we can see Ukraine can guarantee its food storage. There's no problem for the food security. But how about the global food price is soaring? Have you discussed with your counterpart around the world for the issues? For example, China has become the largest buyer for corn since last year. Have you talked to your counterpart to seek any practical solutions? Thank you.
Що стосується продовольства,
As for the grocery networks, the basic essentials such as flour, sugar, bread, oil, meat, dairy products, all the basic essentials are available in the shops. Of course, the range of food is not the same for the remote areas, especially those close to the areas hostilities. But this is a matter of survival for the Ukrainian people in the cities that are besieged or continuously shelled. If you're talking about our beloved city of Kyiv, our capital is being shelled. 60% of city is under direct hostilities. We use a variety of logistical solutions that I'm not free to disclose here to deliver the foodstuffs, to create a month's worth stocks in the city, because we know that the tragedy experienced by the Ukrainian people in Mariupol, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Sumy isn't just about the vast availability of foodstuffs, including Pepsi and other goods, but it's a matter of covering the basic, essential need. The food networks are working non-stop, round the clock. We are opening the imports so that some commodities that are not produced in Ukraine could be replaced by imported goods. We are simplifying the customs clearance to bring the foodstuffs, to bring the vast range of foodstuffs, as the pasta shops are placed in Kherson region, which is occupied now, and this pasta plant had come to a standstill. One of the best companies producing porridges was done in Chernihiv. Kharkiv is one of the food capitals of our country, and the companies have come to a grinding halt. So we have to balance now. But the mission and the vision of the government is about ensuring basic food commodities as fully as we can. Logistics and transportation of people are a separate matter. If you're staying in the western part of Ukraine and you might find shortage of some items, you should know that thousands of people daily migrate from the areas of hostilities to western Ukraine, placing a load on the food networks in here. The western Ukraine has never seen so many people on its land, and this inevitably has an impact on the availability of food. But the internal production balance will be synchronized. Let me tell you, as a minister, we know that these geopolitical processes are going to take some time. I will focus on making sure that the food available in Ukraine will be processed internally. We are lifting taxes for all the companies that are processing foodstuffs, those that are making meat products, bread products. All the cereal crops will be processed internally to create added value. These are the rules of the Marshall economy for our country. As for the global clients, as for our global partners such as China, indeed, China is one of our key trading partners. But now, under these logistical difficulties and the war raging across Ukraine, our key priority are the Ukrainian people. And this is a top priority for us. Our basic logistics is now being restored through rail, through western border. We are negotiating with the EU as for reducing all the quotas and limitations for the sale of agricultural commodities. We are developing some new logistical connections through Romania, Moldova, to sell our products and break into the Black Sea basin through the largest Black Sea ports outside the occupied territories. As for the overall trading balance, this is the following situation. Ukraine will primarily comply with all its contractual obligations if the ceasefire is introduced and access to the sea is opened. The access to the sea is a top priority for the agricultural sector. If the sea is open, then Ukraine will be a stable food supplier. But this is the basic prerequisite, because once again, 80% of Ukrainian agricultural export moves through the port infrastructure located on the Black Sea in the south of our country. Thank you.
See, there is a heavy backfire on the food supplies in Russia. And from what we read in news, Russia has imposed major export restrictions for grains and for some other food supplies, and that tells you that we are dealing with a possible global crisis. And again, when we deal with Ukraine, I think there are three groups of challenges. First, when you talk about territory which is under clear, effective control of the Ukrainian government, the biggest challenge is redistribution of supplies, because just here in the city of Lviv, we have several 100,000 extra customers, so redistribution is the biggest challenge. We have several Ukrainian cities which are under siege. That includes Kharkiv. Mariupol is a big one. Cities like Izyum, Chernihiv, Ochtyrka, and the biggest challenge there is humanitarian corridors and supplies. Mariupol is already in the situation of a humanitarian catastrophe when it comes to food supplies and water. And third part of the equation is the territories temporarily occupied by the Russians. It's tribal land at the moment, and it's very difficult to have a clear picture how food supplies work in those temporarily occupied territories, which is and will be a major challenge. And the next question will go here, and then you.
Вітаю. Kyiv Larson, New York Sun.
Able to harvest 100% of the crops that they anticipated pre-invasion. How do you anticipate they will make up the difference?
Наша позиція
Our position is as follows. If the Ukrainian farmers can sow, if there are no shellings overhead, they will go out and sow. Even the farmers in Kherson region on the occupied territories, he will put up a Ukrainian flag and take his machinery into the field to sow. Our position is as follows. The restoration of territorial integrity is our key objective. It's our people there. Yes, we don't have the logistical route to deliver even the humanitarian relief there. Yesterday, to give an example, to Berdyansk, humanitarian cargo was delivered with food which was simply looted, and Mariupol did not receive the food it so badly needed. The lawlessness that happens there is temporary. Ukraine will regain its territories, and all the farmers, as one, are very patriotic, and all of them have the interests of Ukraine at heart, and they know the importance of the sowing campaign for the country. So if people are crying out that Ukraine is not going to sow, this is not to be believed. Whenever possible, we shall sow. We've sown a record number of the winter crops. We've sown a record number of the winter rape. We have excellent climate and soil conditions. We've provided fertilizers, seed, and protective means, all the lands by 80%. We're receiving support from the EU. We have streamlined all the custom clearance procedures. But as for the occupied territories, it's much more difficult there. We've agreed with the farmers that we would stay in touch. We stay in the loop with them, and we will work inside the occupied territories where the farmer would be helping a farmer with diesel support and seed. The unity of the Ukrainian people and Ukrainian farmers is unprecedented. It's something incredible. For us, it's a matter of survival. The Ukrainians who survived a Holodomor, artificial famine, for us, bread is something holy. And sowing isn't just a farming stage. Sowing is a symbol of life and survival of the Ukrainian people. You cannot imagine what it means for Ukrainians who survived 2 world wars, artificial famine, the deprivations, what it means to sow bread today. It's the same as defending our homeland by standing with the army. The sowing is the same. It's just a different front, a food front. And that will define the survival of the people on these lands. And you know that the Ukrainian dignity is about those who are hungry, but they will not take food from the invaders. You've heard about it, and this is the essence of the Ukrainian people. My question is as follows. Are you working with the agricultural producers to set the priorities for certain crops to give the priority to one groups of crops than the others to maximize the deliveries of the basic commodities? And what will the crop rotation be like in these difficult times? For sure, the agricultural technological maps have changed. We will sow less sunflower, that is certain, because we have ample stocks of sunflower and we can just process our stocks. Ukraine has limited exports of buckwheat, of oat. We are prioritizing winter wheat and spring wheat, and will sow more wheat for the following reasons. Since the agricultural safety is a paramount priority, seeing the world prices on wheat, we know that the prices are going to keep spiraling. Our key commodities for us are those enabling us to make food after processing. Everything to do with cereals, everything to do with bread, everything enabling us to feed the livestock and create added value. All these will be priorities for us. As for the territories that are now a site of hostilities, our Chernihiv region, which is a priority for corn and sunflower, will be making adjustments to their sowing plans when the hostilities are over. I'd like to thank the Austrian partners who've helped us with buckwheat, seed, soya. These are the late vegetation crops that can be sown in late May, even early June. And under the current climate conditions, we still have some minor frost. The soil is still hard, so we can replan the areas, and if some areas remain, will be sown with the crops that are not allowed for export, that will be processed internally. The government will buy out these crops at maximum market rates, and the lands will not go fallow. As Ukrainian farmers are highly technological, the nitrogen fertilizers, sulfate ammonia, will be introduced in the fall, in the autumn. We just introduced the major nitrogen fertilizers in spring. We use spring fertilizers in spring. And this will mean that this sowing campaign will be as flexible as it can possibly be. Our objective as a ministry is to use AgroStatus.org platform to coordinate the effort, to check and balance, to help support, provide with the seed stocks, work with the distributors to make sure the protective chemicals are sold. Banks are offering zero interest loans for the agricultural companies, so that the agricultural companies have everything they need. They have the materials and the working capital. The problem is that often the agricultural companies have 8 million worth of stock, but they cannot sell what they have in their warehouses because the internal consumption in Ukraine has begun to increase, particularly for the food commodities, but historically, Ukraine has been a major exporter. You need to see that this war is a hybrid war to a very great degree, because having blocked the Ukrainian ports, destroying the agrarian production by mining the Ukrainian fields, it's a sabotage of the Ukrainian economy, because agriculture contributes half the currency income of the budget and 20% of the Ukrainian GDP. So by blocking the operation of the Ukrainian agriculture, the economy is undermined. And this is more than just missiles and rockets. It's a genocide of the key agricultural sector of our country. The agricultural sector has shown maximum growth last year. The land reform, the irrigation reform, the increase of the gross production was making Ukraine stronger. In 2021, Ukraine reached the level of 200 million GDP, and agriculture played a lion's share in this. So we'll be very flexible, and we'll be making adjustments as we go along. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, sir.
Any
Yeah.
specific questions? Very simple question.
Use
Great. Okay, very simple. If you can answer in English, it would be
Yeah, you're
preferred.
welcome, sir.
I know you stated it in Ukrainian previously, but can you say in English the percentage of exports that will be affected by the war and what areas of export to? Вот так. Да, пожалуйста. И какой уровень?
Yeah. So, just for understanding, when we are talking about global export of wheat, corn, barley, it's like our global position. Of course, we are talking about export. It's around $10 billion. It's just for the economy issue. If we are talking about situation for the countries like Egypt, Yemen, Libya, it's a critical point because our wheat is the best logistic, the best price, and they have a long-term contract with Ukraine. Now we have this law case when we want to execute our contract, but we have the situation with the war. Our partners deeply understand the situation, and they are looking for another exporters. But another exporters, firstly Russia, blocked, Kazakhstan stopped, and other countries, they restart their vision about food security, firstly for their market. State and government all over the Europe, they start to buy the wheat for their reservation. Because everybody understands that the situation with fertilizers that we have right now, and we are talking about deficit around 50% for European countries, because Belarus also one of the global exporter of fertilizers, as Russia also. They understand that the crop will be not on the highest level, and the indicators will be very, very on bad issue. They understand the price of the wheat will be growing, and they understand that the best price to buy right now. So we have just a critical situation when everybody, government, is really very selfish because they take care about their nation and they buy by the best price right now. From other side, we see the countries that wanted to be a stable food supplier, but they blocked, and other countries that play special role for the global crisis, not only in the political issue, in the war, but also in the global food issue, because this disaster is continuing to grow. We don't understand because we never had such kind of situation like that. Such kind of global food crisis we've never had, because exporting was one of the biggest advantages of Black Sea region. So of course, in such kind of issue, any experts, any mass media that try to investigate the case, they don't have the stable understanding of this case, because it's a huge rally with many factors that nobody controls right now. And of course, everything depends also on weather condition right now, because it's also very important, because without fertilizers but without moisture, we also don't have any possibility to increase our productivity all over the world. And we see, and we talk with World Food Program, we talked with United Nations, we talked with many other partners. We just wanted to explain that in this case, nobody can be alone. Ukraine can be alone in their political global problem. We need to unite our efforts and to solve the point with the peace, with the food, and with the surviving of million people all over the world. And this is the most critical right now. That's the reason why I'm here today and communicate with you, because I'm really very important to transfer this message to the world. It's not only our personal issue in general. Thank you very much for attention.
We'll take one more question.
a bit follow-up of his question about the number. Do you have some estimations, like number, percentage, of how much could be the drop in the sowing area of Ukraine?
About the global situation of Ukraine, especially that everything change every day. Of course, we see like 20-25% of lost right now in our productivity. But if you're talking about compensation in this case, it's more about financial resources. And if we invest more in the west part, in the central part, with fertilizers, with technologies, we can compensate some part of this lost in the east and in the south of Ukraine. But in any case, we, due to the situation with the weather conditions, that it's still cold and we have some limit of time to start our agriculture campaign, we hope that we will find the compromise with the peace and we'll have the opportunity in hurry to invest more to the south, to the east, and everything what we need just to logistic opportunity to transfer seeds, to transfer fertilizers and fuel for our farmers. If we blocked, we will be in the autonomy regime when farmers in their capacity for the field, what they have for the moment, they will start their seed campaign. But after that, we will be very flexible to change the technologies from wheat to corn, from corn to soybeans, and it depends on the political situation. But the mood of Ukrainian farmers is very, very positive. In any case, they will continue to move because they deeply understand how it's important for Ukrainian nation. Thank you very much.
More questions? Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. Shawki Amin Abdel Malik, Al-Arabi TV based in London. It's Qatari channel. You mentioned now that many Arab worlds had been impacted, by this embargo. What is the feedback of these Arabic countries? We saw that Palestine, Libya, Syria, you mentioned now, there is a lack of these essential products from Ukraine. What is the feedback of these countries? Thank you.
Well, they deeply disturbed about everything what's going on. Nobody understands how to move in this case. Of course, our Middle East partner, firstly Qatar, it's our global partner. We know that with the president of Ukraine and me as a minister, we had a couple historical visits to the Middle East where we signed the contracts for our food security program. And Qatar for us was very important for trading, just to support such kind of countries that you mentioned previously. Now we are going with another position. Firstly, it's all about financial instrument from such kind of countries to support the government of more poor countries. But from our other side, I just wanted to mention it just to give the guarantees that Ukraine never will refuse for their role of food supplier globally. Everything what we need, just open the sea. Open the sea, just one port for us, and we will be ready to move very fast. Ukraine can, per 1 month, to export 5 million tons. We're very, very fast in that. We have very good technologies. We invested $1 billion in our infrastructure in ports. By the way, with Qatar, we opened fantastic projects last year. It's a queue terminal in Mykhailo, and we started to negotiate with the project in Chernomorsk. And with our Middle East partners, of course, we are looking for such kind of opportunity. But now we're asking them to support from financial side such kind of poor countries, and from our other side, it will have the window to start the exporting. We will be in couple of weeks ready to go. And capacity and storaging, what we have right now, it's more than 20 million tons that we have right now. And you need to understand that the condition with climate right now is pretty good for us. So in 2 months, we will be ready for the new campaign with wheat and with barley. And I think that if we have the possibility to work with our agrarian technology, with self-sprayers, with herbicides, with everything, what we do as usual, Ukraine will have loss, but they will not be critical. It's more about the territory and about stable situation for the Ukrainian farmers and Ukrainian workers. Thank you very much.
Minister Leshchenko, this is the time we have for you. Thank you so much for coming up here, and we hope to get more good news from you in the future.
Colleagues, I'm really sorry that I'm combining English and Ukrainian from time to time. It's, just a little bit nervous about it. Thank you very much.
And it is my understanding that Minister will have some short time of availability for additional comments. Those of you who are interested, please catch him right away. And Minister, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And we will immediately proceed to our next briefing, and we will have a chance to listen to Anton Kurenevich, who is the Ukraine's agent or representative in the International Court of Justice, and we hope to get some important details from him on this very important decision by the International Court of Justice effective yesterday. And this decision was specifically on the Russian invasion into Ukraine. And after this, we will have a chance to speak to Ukrainian parliamentarians who are members of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and they will tell us about the recent news from Strasbourg, where Russia was recently kicked out of the Council of Europe. And if we are ready for the next briefing, and those of you who need translation, please use our headphones. And we will continue at 1 p.m. with the briefing from the Ukrainian delegation in the Council, in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Thank you, and stand with Ukraine. and I think we are ready to start. And the reason we brought Mrs. Kravchuk in is the recent decisions by the Council of Europe to expel the Russian Federation from this very respected international organizations. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to Yevheniia, and please do tell us of the significance of this decision.
Yes, dear colleagues, I'm really honored to address you. I'm already in Ukraine. I came back from Strasbourg yesterday late at night. And yes, it's a big victory of Ukrainian delegation and Ukraine, because Council of Europe is the first international organization that excluded Russia from its membership. And yesterday, maybe you saw this picture. I think it's historical picture. When the Russian flag was brought down from the flagstock near the building of Council of Europe. To say it's very simple, Russia was excluded from Europe because it's the only organization that is, well, mainly based in geographically in Europe that Russia had membership in. So right now, 46 member states are in Council of Europe. It's very important to understand that it was the decision of Council of Europe to exclude Russia. It wasn't based on the letter that Lavrov sent to Secretary General Council of Europe. At first, we voted in Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe an opinion that clearly stated that Russia cannot be longer a member of Council of Europe. And the next day, yesterday, on the March 16th, Committee of Ministers decided to exclude Russia. So I think it could be precedental for other international organizations to follow. I know that my colleagues from OSCE Parliamentary Assembly are also working on the way to exclude Russia, and I'm also a member of OSCE delegation, and I had a speech a few days ago for the Standing Committee. Also, our diplomats are working on the issue of Russia being in the Defense Council of United Nations and blocking and putting veto on every decisions. So it's very important to understand that when a country becomes a country terrorist, it can't be among the civilized nations. Probably Russia could come back to Council of Europe, I don't know, years and years after, but they would have to have a democratic government for that, and to fill, all the documents and to go through the whole process. Now, I want to also address one issue that a lot of people are asking about. It's about the European Court of Human Rights. Right now, we are waiting for legal explanation from the Committee of Ministers of Council of Europe and from European Court of Human Rights, how they will proceed with all the cases where Russian Federation is, to follow and to fulfill the decisions. Because right now there are 2,000 of decisions that Russia didn't take, didn't do anything, didn't pay money, or didn't do anything but to release people from prisons and so on and so forth. Most of the lawyers who deal with this topic, they say that the Convention for Human Rights is still is still going for Russia for another 6 months. So the applications could be filed to European Court for Human Rights, but we're still waiting for this legal explanation to be sure that the process will follow the way it is, I explained.
For quite a long time, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe has been...
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't hear your question.
Okay. Раз, два, три, четыре, пять.
Now I hear.
For quite a long time, the Parliamentary Assembly has been reluctant in employing tough measures against Russia that Ukraine has been asking for. What changed what changed the attitude towards Russia this time?
Well, Russia absolutely crossed the red line since February 24th. And of course, we were talking to members of the assembly for years that the war has started in February of 2014, and people are dying all the time. But only now, when Russia imposed this full-scale aggression in the whole territory of the country, and actually we used a terminology which is really important. It's called the war of aggression. And it also was called Nuremberg Tribunal. So it's every country, every member of PACE saw these pictures and video, and actually thanks for those journalists also who are working on the ground. That Russia is not fighting a war with military; they are fighting a war with civilians. And when I was speaking to the Parliamentary Assembly during the debates, I was addressing them not only as members of PACE, but also as members of national parliaments who can put pressure on their governments to give the bigger assistance in weapons, in humanitarian aid, in financial aid, in putting sanctions to Russia, because only country terrorist is killing civilians every day. And we have these, huge numbers of killed people, for example, in Mariupol. I mean, it's my personal point of view, but I think that international tribunal should be later on put in Mariupol, and it could, because this city became a symbolic of that Russia wants to erase from the face of the earth, and more than 2,000 people died only in Mariupol. And while these members of PACE will be traveling home to their home countries, at the very same time, children, women, elderly people are staying in the basements with no food, with no electricity, with no water, but they do have hope. They do have hope that Europe and the whole civilized world will wake up and impose more sanctions on Russia, putting a total embargo on whatever Russia is selling. And I'm totally, I listened to President's speech to Bundestag, and he was telling the truth. He was telling the truth that you put some sort of wall, economical wall, because French and German companies, they do still work in Russia, a lot of companies. And some of the European countries, they say we cannot, stop buying gas and oil. But every euro they are paying to Russia, this euro returns as a bullet to an innocent child in Ukraine.
And what other support do you hope to get from your fellow parliamentarians from other countries? What do you ask for, and what do you get in back?
Yes, actually, we are launching a big network of parliamentarians, both from European Parliament and from national parliaments, and it's called United for Ukraine. This format was proposed by Andrius Kubilius, the former Prime Minister of Lithuania, and now he's a member of European Parliament. So he proposed this network of parliamentarians to stay together, and we'll have the first meeting next Tuesday, the March 22nd. So we could deal with different issues. Of course, with the additional help of Ukraine and putting pressure to the governments of different countries to give more weapons to Ukraine, to give more humanitarian aid, and also now a big issue that has to be addressed is the people who are living in country, and it's more than 3 million now, mainly women and kids, and they are vulnerable. So we need an assistance from all the governments to make sure that they won't be easy targets for human trafficking, and they will have a chance to wait in these different countries while after the victory we'll rebuild Ukraine and ask them to come back.
Thank you. This was Yevheniia Kravchuk, Ukrainian parliamentarian and member of our delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And again, she just told us about the recent, very important decision by Council of Europe and by its Parliamentary Assembly to exclude or expel Russia from this very respected international organization. Thank you, Mrs. Kravchuk. Дякую, пані Євгенія.
Дякую.
And
Слава Україні.
And to everyone, Heroyam Slava, and to everyone, our next briefing will be at 2 o'clock. We'll be focused on healthcare issues. Stand with Ukraine.